Good evening. This is the April 11th, 2011 Littleton Planning Commission meeting. It's our regular meeting with our annual organizational meeting. So can we start with a roll call, Doreen?
Commissioner Bagnall?
Here.
Commissioner Bockenstead?
Here.
Commissioner Coronado?
Here.
Commissioner Elrod? Commissioner Gallagher?
Here.
Commissioner Newfinke?
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf?
Here.
Commissioner Ranville?
Here.
Commissioner Samuelson?
Here.
Okay. Do we have any changes to the agenda for the regular meeting and the annual organizational meeting? Seeing none, let's move on to the approval of the March 14th, 2011 minutes. Do we have any changes?
Actually, I don't know what order to present this in because we don't have a motion on the table. I'm a little concerned that there's virtually no discussion recorded in these minutes. None of the issues we talked about, none of the grounds for approving or hesitating to approve. It's just yep, they voted on it, and here was the vote. And rather than sit there and edit this and add that and that sort of thing, I'd kind of like to request that we get a set of minutes that shows the reasoning behind, what we did for the record, my opinion.
We've had discussion of this, I think, at City Council, too, and the thought was to have just action minutes with the thought that the records are there. The alternative, of course, is to have that spelled out in the motion. So when you do the motion, if you go through and cite the criteria, you can then get into more detailed motion that is recorded in the minutes. The trouble gets to be if we go through and start identifying the rationale, it's rather subjective as to, I think we'll have a little different take in terms of, what reasons were. Whereas if it's summarized in the motion says, I'm voting this way for these things, and then the majority votes that way, then it's a pretty good record as when combined with Granicus in the recordings, I think.
Up to about 6 months ago, that wasn't a problem. We were getting the discussion, the primary points discussed, regardless of whether we were saying 4 out of 7 or 5 out of 2 are voting for it for this reason. We at least said, here are the issues out there, here's what we talked about, here were the major viewpoints, so that there was some history, some rationale behind what we talked about. But just a bare, well, it was approved by a 6-1 or a 7-0 vote.
Dave, can we put that on our follow-up agenda item so that we can actually address this and talk about it as a commission and be prepared to talk about it?
And I'm perfectly happy with doing it either one of two ways, either throwing it back to staff, asking that be recovered in a different draft of the minutes, or we can try and do it. But I just think it's an important issue to deal with.
Okay, so are you guys okay with putting on a list to address outstanding issues for just the subject matter of how we want to handle the minutes going forward? Everybody okay with that?
I would support Dave's idea.
Okay.
So we want to delay the approval of the minutes? Is that what we're saying?
That we'll add this as a separate agenda item. And then the next question would be, do we actually go ahead and approve the minutes, or do we table it for another time? Is that, Suzanne, does that work?
That works. I would just suggest that if you want to have this this type of a discussion, it might actually be better to do it at your workshop, because this is the direction that council has gone and all the boards and commissions have gone. And if the commission does want more detailed minutes, I think it's something that the commission is going to have to take back to the council and say, we want them for this reason. And because you are going to be allocating staff time to do it, unless you do, as Commissioner Metcalf stated, and do your own.
So all those in favor of addressing this during the workshop, raise your hand. So that, seeing that as unanimous. Dave, you were going to say something?
No, I'm just a little puzzled that council's now dictating the minutes and that sort of thing of how boards and commissions operate.
But we're going to be discussing it in our...
Well, yeah, but if we decide we need to have more detail, the implication is council is going to decide, no, it isn't worth staff time to do that?
Well, it's not that council's dictating it, it's just that as council went that direction, most of staff went that direction. If, as a board and commission, you want to have an allocation of staff time, I think this is covered in the protocols, and it's going to be a significant amount of staff time as we go forward, let's say 2 additional hours every meeting, then that has to get into a staff work plan, and if it's not currently in a staff work plan, then it takes council to put it into one.
All the more reason then to talk about it at the workshop, and we
Yeah,
can
really,
decide.
just-
If we decide that the way to do it is to take the bare bones minutes we get from staff and add the points that we think are important, then we're free to do that. Okay.
Okay,
I
so
think
can
there's
we
some
take
alternatives,
this,
yeah.
the minutes that we have
Put that
before
in the
us?
form of a motion.
Sure.
Motion that we approve these minutes and review the level of detail that we get in future minutes at the workshop.
Second, do we have a second?
Okay.
So Craig and
Second that.
Kurt seconding?
My problem with that is we're letting this opportunity go by. There were a couple of significant issues that should be on the record for both of those cases that we talked about, and I just don't want to see that opportunity lost in a rush to get the minutes approved. I mean, we've gone months without approving minutes before. I think we can afford a few more weeks.
If you think there are significant issues, we can actually add them right now into the minutes.
You know, we've got too much else to do tonight to talk that out, and because I didn't come prepared with a list of points to be made, and we don't want to wordsmith that tonight. So if we can wait and do this after the workshop or at the workshop, I think we'd be better off and come prepared.
So we have a motion to approve these minutes. Shall we go ahead and vote on them? And we're not actually voting for the approval, but to actually go forward and review them tonight, and then we'll vote a second time to approve them. Does that work?
I thought the motion was to accept them and then reconsider the additional.
Let me accept the friendly amendment there, if you would, that we table the minutes till after we've had an opportunity to discuss them at the workshop.
So that could be May
Well,
or
actually, if
June.
we do a study session, we're thinking about waiting a significant amount of time after Glenn has been here. If he arrives on May 16th, so at least be June, I think, before you want to have your workshop. It may even be the first part of July, just depending on what everybody's schedule is at that point, what Glenn's schedule is. So it could be out of.
Do we have adequate notes to reconstruct the minutes?
I do.
What about
Well, Granicus, I mean, if you go through it, and that's, I think, as Suzanne said, I think there was a lot of discussion at City Council because they were going through and spending a lot of time kind of debating, what should be in the minutes and what should not be in the minutes. And the discussion came down to, well, we've got a couple of boards, Planning Commission and City Council, which have Granicus and actually have everything recorded. So if you really want the details, you can go back and see that. So they decided that it just wasn't worth their time or expenditure of staff time to take that much time to not only write them, but then rewrite them and rewrite them.
Steve?
So they do decisions only, the actions. Other boards, we don't have that kind of recording, so we get into more detail in terms of what decisions. I think the simplest solution, again, is to just maybe a combination where we have the recordings, you can get every point of the discussion, but at the same time, if the motion actually incorporates the key points of that discussion and what the rationale for the decision is and ties it into your criteria, then you've got a pretty good basis for going back and looking.
Steve?
What about tabling it to our next meeting?
Regular scheduled
To our
meeting?
next regular scheduled meeting when we will go over the next set of minutes for,
could put that on the agenda,
like
sure.
tonight's meeting. We can then have a chance to prepare for it.
I'm okay with that amended
So
motion.
you're okay to withdraw your motion, and then, Steve, your motion is to approve it at our next regular scheduled meeting, and do we have a second?
Seconded, so he has to accept that friendly amendment.
Yeah, do you-
Accept that.
Okay. And so, Steve, is there a second to Steve's motion?
Second.
Mark seconds that, so should we go ahead and vote on that? So all those in favor? Mark? Matt, oops. Sorry, Matt. Jenny?
We do.
Don't feel bad, guys. It took me 6 months to get the hang of it, or longer.
All right, so that motion is approved. And that takes us down to scheduled and unscheduled appearances. Do we have anybody in the audience that would like to do any scheduled or unscheduled appearances? There is. Seeing none, we'll move to the general business. And our first item is election of officers. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the voting process for the planning commissions. The nominations for chair or chair pro tem or any of the liaisons will be accepted from the commission. There are no seconds required for the nominations, and this all is based on the Roberts Rules of Order and also our rules of procedures for the Planning Commission. So then there is no actual discussion regarding the chair based on Roberts Rules, and the chair takes all of the nominations and then closes the nominations without a formal vote. The chair will ask the candidate if they agree with the nomination, and then we'll take a vote on the nominations. So if the chair then will take over the gavel immediately after the election and resume the election for the chair pro tem and also the Historic Preservation Board. For only this meeting, the commissioners will stay in their assigned seats, and the new chair will take over the gavel and running the meetings. So we have like one administrative issue to address. Per Robert's rules, balloting is usually done for an election, and based on the Colorado Open Meetings laws, we would need to suspend this rule and then use our normal voting process. So I'm looking for somebody on the commission to make that motion so that we can use our normal voting process, or so.
So moved.
And do we have
Second.
a second? So Steve and Dave seconding. And should we go ahead and take a vote? And all are in favor of that? So then let's start with the nominations. Do we have some nominations for the chair of the Planning Commission? Steve?
I'd like to nominate Linda for the chair.
Other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Coronado.
And any other nominations? Okay, based on the procedures, the nominations are closed, and we can go ahead with voting. So based on the order that the nominations were mentioned, we can start with Linda. So all those in favor of Linda as the chair of the Planning Commission? Oh, wait, I forgot to ask if, Craig, you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Okay. And I accept the nomination, too. So all those in favor of Linda, vote. Okay. All in favor? Thank you very much. And the vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Craig.
Second? Do we have a second?
We need a second?
Oh, we don't need a second, sorry. So, Craig, any other nominations for vice chair? So
I'd like to nominate Jennifer as
Jennifer, do you accept it?
Yes.
Okay. And Craig, you accept it? Okay. So again, based on the order that we received, let's vote on Craig. All those in favor? Everyone in favor? And now, do we have a motion for the liaison for the Historic Preservation Board? Does anybody want it?
nominate yourself, I guess.
What's the time commitment for that?
They meet one time a month.
One time a month?
On a Monday.
On a Monday, they do have some special meetings periodically, too, that you get to attend. But
Tony, you can be the liaison, too, if you're interested. Yep, absolutely. Sure.
I'm not really interested.
Okay. So do we have any nominations?
I'd nominate Jennifer if she's interested.
No, time commitment-wise, I think it would be hard for me.
Okay.
Given the number of Monday evenings lately we're spending in here, it seems to be everyone's problem.
Have one commissioner absent.
There's a danger in being absent.
And Robert's rules do say that we can nominate somebody who's not here tonight.
That's vicious. I wouldn't do that to my worst enemy. Well, maybe not.
So how can we dispose of this? If we see no nominations, can we bring it back when Corinne's here?
Well,
Well, we could.
Matt, would you be interested?
I'm not sure I know enough yet to do it. I wouldn't have a problem doing it. I'm just not sure I know enough. Although I've read almost everything, but I'm pretty inexperienced still.
Well, it's really, I've been doing it for the last year, and their subjects are very similar or of concern to the Planning Commission, and they're interested in hearing what's happening at the Planning Commission. So what I've found is, a very brief report is all that's required of the Planning Commissioner, but attendance at their meetings is important to hear what they're doing. Right now they're developing design guidelines for historic structures, and there's always quite a bit of business on the agenda. So I've done it for 1 year, and before that, Commissioner Brown.
And how often do they meet, did you say? Once a month?
One Monday.
Once a month, typically. I mean, they periodically will have additional meetings, but typically once a month. Yeah.
And typically, how long do those meetings last?
hour and a half, 2 hours.
Hour and a half, 2 hours. Yeah.
I'll do it.
Great.
Their meetings are actually they're very interesting.
Okay, seeing no additional nominations, the nominations are closed, and let's go ahead and vote for Tony.
I'd like to nominate Tony.
Just to keep it kosher?
All right, so all those in favor?
Vote before
Thank you,
he changes
Tony.
his mind.
So now our next order of business is approval of the resolutions 11-4, 11-5, and 11-6. And these are resolutions thanking Julio Iturria and Pablo Strovopoulos and Norm Brown for their service on the Planning Commission. So can we take...
And making Julio an emeritus member.
Right. So can we vote on those all three together, or do we need to vote on them separately?
You should technically do the three of them separately.
Okay.
They have separate numbers, don't they?
So the 11-4 resolution, that is for, I don't have the resolutions in front of me, is that for?
We're
We haven't
looking
done
to
that.
see who it's for.
So 11-4 for Norm Brown. All those in favor?
Gonna wear out our fingers.
Unanimous. 11-5.
And that is for Julio.
All those in favor of Resolution 11-5 for Julio? That is unanimous. And
Yeah, well, that could be too.
and Resolution 11-6 for Pablos. All those in favor? And that is again unanimous.
See, I try and form good habits, and you want me to break it.
So down to public hearing, seeing none, let's move to reports by staff.
A couple things. It's a busy week for meetings, and if you haven't noticed already. Tomorrow night, City Council's having a study session on the proposed lighting ordinance. This is a study session. If it does move forward, it would come to Planning Commission and then come back to City Council. So that they wanted to get a sense of if they agreed with the concept. They're inviting the owners of and representatives of the different car dealerships in, because that's a particularly large issue for them. Is it sufficient lighting? And does it work well for them in terms of how it's placed? And does the whole process work? So part of the discussion will be talking about how does it actually affect the dealerships, as well as other commercial owners in town. A meeting on Wednesday night is an open house. That starts at 5 to 7 in the community room. That's an open house for the pedestrian bicycle master plan. That's and I think as you'll hear if you go to the open house, it's really an operational plan. It's a work program for the Public Services Department in terms of how do they actually move forward with finalizing the system that they have in place already. And then our next meeting is Monday, April 25th. And May will be on May 9th. On May 3rd, the Historic Preservation Board has the awards meeting, presentation that we'll be doing with Historic Littleton. And that will be in here as well. No, that's going to be at the museum, I'm sorry. At the library. At the library, I'm sorry. Someplace. It's in town. So at the library. So there's a whole series of meetings coming up. And that's it.
Suzanne?
I don't have a report.
Okay, the liaison reports for the former HP board.
Yes,
Member?
I did attend the last HP board meeting, and the majority of the discussion was there weren't any specific projects before the board at that time. It was mostly about their strategic plan for the next year, and they have a very aggressive agenda, and I can share that with anybody, outside the meeting if you're interested, but they were setting priorities for the year, anticipating the meeting with Historic Littleton and the awards dinner that Dennis just mentioned.
Okay. Any commissioners? Anything to report? Anyone? Going once, going twice?
We've been postponing this. Dennis, there's a CML conference up in Vail, June 21st to 24th.
Yeah, something like that. And typically, we've been sending people to CML. We didn't send anybody last year at all, staff or commissioners. We certainly can pay the tuition if people are interested, and we do have access to the agenda. I would recommend going online and looking at it because it's fairly detailed and see if it's something of interest to you. But go to Colorado Municipal League and just Google that, and they'll come up, and you can look at the annual meeting. Typically, it's a really good meeting. Typically, they get into some good information. It's geared more towards elected officials and city attorneys. So there's a lot that's directed towards the attorneys as well as the elected officials, but there's usually something in it that has a really good perspective on it. So do look at it and see, but we certainly can pay the tuition. We would not pick up this year the hotel or the transportation as we've done in the past.
Is anybody from staff or council planning on going at this point?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I think there's 4 council people going, and yeah. I'm going. I think Kelly Nardi's going. I don't remember who else. I'm sure Charlie will go for some part of it. I'm not going till Thursday morning. The attorney session doesn't start till Thursday afternoon into Friday, so it just depends which sessions you're interested in. Tuesday, there's usually an opening session that's for everybody. Wednesday is more of the elected official and managers track, but there's typically a lot of good seminars on land use issues on Wednesday, but Thursday is when the legal education starts.
So city would pay for the registration fee?
Right.
Anything we do as far as hotel, that sort of thing?
Right.
We're on our own.
Okay. Yeah, we're just pretty tight, so I apologize.
No, that's good.
Anybody have anything else? No? And I don't have anything either, so can we go ahead and have a motion to adjourn to a study session?
Motion to adjourn to a study session.
Second.
And all those in favor? And it's unanimous again.
Okay. We're going to stay here. We're not moving to the other room. It's a little easier, I think. There's just in terms of the TV, so it's not quite as convenient, perhaps, for the study session, but I think it works. agenda will look familiar. It's kind of a simplified version of what we've done the last couple meetings. We've made pretty good progress. I mean, I think we really moved along well last time. So the hope is we can just start where we left off last time and keep going. So. Page 15, is that where we are? LU 12? No, we're waiting. We are, where's my copy?
On LU 12?
Oh, there, you got my copy. Okay. Oh, is that what we did? Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes, so we're on LU
That's right.
12.
LU
and,
12, thank you. That's right.
First
Okay,
off,
LU
let's,
12.
can we talk a little bit about the agenda goals and the formats for the meeting? We have on the agenda to review the draft plan and look at outstanding issues and provide direction. And then on the agenda is revisit meeting goals, schedules, and upcoming meetings, and then adjournment. Do we have any modifications to this agenda? One thing I'd like to bring up is that when we talked about historical preservation, we didn't provide the opportunity to see if anybody wanted to add any goals. So I would really like to just see real quickly if anybody has any goals they want to add for historic preservation. And then go ahead and proceed back to LU 12. Is that okay with you guys?
That's right.
So does anybody have any goals they would like to add for historic preservation? Steve, do you have any goals that you want to add for historic preservation that we didn't go over last week? No? Seeing none, let's go ahead and move over to LU 12. LU 12 is downtown lighting should create a coordinated theme, be appropriate for adjacent land uses, help maintain the historic character, and be energy efficient. Do we still want to go through all these? We agreed to go through them one by one. And do you guys still feel that that's appropriate for the land use section? Yes?
I think we need to.
Okay. So who's in favor of goal LU 12?
I've got a question.
Mm-hmm.
Since city council hasn't decided what we're going to do in the lighting thing, do we really need to go through with this until we get some guidance from them and get to vote on what their plan is and then send it back to them?
I guess a little clarification. It's very confusing because we've got the lighting ordinance, which is being discussed tomorrow night at City Council. That's talking about commercial properties, so that's talking about and other buildings. It doesn't deal with the streetlights themselves, whereas this one's really talking about the streetlights.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
That was
Probably should say street lighting.
That was going to be my clarification. It should be streetlights or public lighting.
Well, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, and I think it's a question for City Council always, as to the ordinance does not deal with the streetlights. It's always, I think, questions to why not, but they're kind of apples and oranges to some degree.
Any other questions or concerns? Seeing none, let's go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor of LU 12?
With the change?
Change
With street lighting?
Street lighting.
Okay.
Downtown street lighting?
With the change of street lighting, all those in favor? Seeing none opposed, let's move to LU 12A. Create a downtown lighting plan that identifies energy-saving provisions and a hierarchy of lighting types, spacing, and levels of light.
I think we need to add something. It really isn't just the levels of light. It's also the direction and the quality of light. As a matter of fact, especially for lighting that may impinge on residential construction, not just the R5, but any residential, the direction and quality may be more important than the quantity.
So your motion is to add direction and quality to that implementation strategy.
Yeah, between levels and of.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor of that? Unanimous?
And I would suggest that we add street to that as well.
Okay, all those in favor of adding street? Okay. So that takes us to LU 13. Development in areas immediately adjacent to downtown should be designed with consideration of its proximity to downtown and its potential role as an element of a gateway to downtown. Kurt, you had some issues with this? I marked it as having issues.
Is that the entire area? Is that what that's meant to cover?
I think my only question was, should this be in this section, or shouldn't this be in the other sections that are adjacent to the downtown area? I mean, this is telling them what we're going to do in
The discussion came up, actually, Dick Farley brought this up. This is one that, as I recall, when we were looking at property directly west of downtown, west of the library, on the west side of Santa Fe, for example. If that were to have a high-rise on it, that would impact the view down Main Street. If there was something at the sheriff's site, that would impact downtown. So this was kind of thinking about those, and yes, they're not in the downtown per se, and it's a very good question. Should it be in the downtown plan? And I think it's a call that you can make in terms of where do you deal with it otherwise? Is this the best place you think to put that? Because this certainly is an issue that comes up as you're discussing downtown.
Should we deal with it here?
I'm not sure
because
there's
this
a right
is
or
the one
wrong
we're going to
answer.
get done first, and it might.
I'm sorry?
Should we deal with it here because this is what we're going to do first, and it may take a while before we have the other two?
Well, I think that's part of the argument. Yeah, I think when you get to Santa Fe, you can deal with it again. But again, it gives you direction, and all it does is kind of talk about its consideration of downtown. It doesn't give more specifics than that. Just saying this is within the area of influence. It's kind of like we talked about early. So it's a real general direction, just saying, they are interrelated.
It's a relationship.
Steve?
Yeah.
Should it be designed or should it be planned?
I'd suggest planned.
Yeah,
The
I like
difference
that.
sounds minor.
I like the idea of planned instead of designed.
Okay.
I also
Craig?
think it could be a little bit broader. I think it assumes that it might be part of a gateway to downtown, whereas adjacent development really has a role and impact on adjacent development, not necessarily as a gateway. So I was just going to suggest that, instead of saying its potential role as an element of a gateway, that its potential role and impact on downtown. Or and potential impact on downtown.
Potential?
So where would you put that in there?
Right after potential role, I would delete as an element of a gateway and put and potential impact on.
Downtown.
I guess the question here is, I know why this came up. It came up because we started talking about things, months and months ago about adjacent properties. Should they be part of downtown? Should they not? The property on the northwest corner of Santa Fe and Bowles was the first one that came to mind. The sheriff's property south of the courthouse and the Buck Center is another one. I guess the question is, are we talking about every property around the entire perimeter of the downtown area? Or are we talking about those significant sites that are going to have some impact on the approach to downtown?
The way this is worded, it's talking about all.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
except for the reference to gateways, so and I guess that's what I'm getting at. Are we going to talk about this as everything all around the downtown area, the downtown neighborhood? Or are we talking about those key points where the entry into downtown is critical or significant?
If you went to every gateway to downtown there, you're going to touch every one of those properties that are adjacent to the downtown area. If you go to the north, you go to the south, east, or west, all of those are going to.
And I'm not advocating necessarily one or the other. I'm just saying right now, if we take out the gateway element, that says, okay, we're talking about every property in the entire perimeter of downtown. And I'm not sure a lot of the properties from the Buck Center north to Alexan Station and then back down to the intersection with Prince, I'm not sure most of those are all that critical or even subject to redevelopment. So I guess I'm trying to get at what's our thrust here? What is it we're trying to do for the downtown area that says we have to reach out beyond the downtown perimeter in order to address it here?
As far as adjacent, would the train tracks stop the adjacency there on the east side?
No, because the sheriff's sites.
Yeah, sheriff's site, and I would think that it would include probably the Mayflower site. And,
So the
others.
adjacency can go across a road, it can also go across the train track?
Yeah, I would think so. I think because we see that as our border.
I don't see
So
that
I
it
think
hurts to encompass all of those properties. How is that?
I'm just wondering if they're not overreaching. And then as we move on to other areas, are we going to do the same thing for the perimeter of every area, one by one? Or are we talking about the primary linkages that are going to have some effect on what's going on downtown?
Again, we're back to this area is more, has a lot more going on, especially the historic district, and that's what we're trying to preserve in all of this. But we could have some development if there's through the Slaughterhouse Gulch area, we could have some develop on the other side. We could have some development at the Mayflower site down here.
Can we vote right now on who wants to change this text?
Can I throw out one more thought before we do that? Right now, one of my concerns was that the implementation strategies tend to really just regurgitate the same thing that's in the policy. So if we said, look, there are two concerns we have about properties immediately outside the downtown. One is the effect of the properties at the critical points where we have connections, gateways, and then try and be specific about what our concerns are there versus the more generalized concern about the other properties that don't have direct linkages and direct effects. I mean, most of the properties between the Buck Center and Bellevue aren't going to have a whole lot of direct effect on downtown. So if we could consider it that way, then maybe we can put a little more meat into the implementation strategies than what we have right now.
Okay, so those who want to substantially change this policy, raise your hand. So we want to reword it, not based on the wording that we discussed. How should we reword it, Tony?
I think the gateway is a key factor. If we limit it to north and south on Prince and east and west on Main Alamo, with the river being the western boundary, and what is the courthouse being the eastern boundary, for a block or two north or south. I don't see what we gain by doing everything around the whole area there, because that's going to limit some development too that may not, coincide with our historical area. I agree that it might be overreaching the way it's leaded right now.
What about changing development in areas immediately adjacent to downtown, change downtown to the gateways?
And that works for me.
That work for?
Could you repeat that, Steve?
Let's see, development in areas immediately adjacent to the downtown gateways?
Yeah.
There's still add planned in there.
Yes.
Planned and then as
Planned.
an impact on downtown.
It should be planned with consideration of its proximity to downtown and its potential role and potential impact to downtown. Right?
That's what I had in there, but I think if you add gateway up ahead, you don't need to change the gateway at the end.
So all those in favor of those modifications? Or any more discussion?
So do we say, and its potential role and impact to downtown?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. I'm in favor of that.
All those in favor of this? Okay, that's unanimous. So now we're moving to LU 13. Design new developments immediately adjacent to downtown so that they are consistent with the vision and goals for downtown, reflect and take advantage of their proximity to downtown, encourage connections to downtown, function as a part of the gateway to downtown when that is appropriate, and in other ways are coordinated with this plan. That's a lot of words.
And to Dave's point, I don't think it says that much differently than the policy does.
More words.
So should we delete the implementation strategy?
I don't know, is there a distinction there, Dennis, that I'm not seeing, or?
No, I think the way you've written the policy kind of summarizes this. It goes into a little bit more detail, which I guess is the idea, and often that happens. I think that this talks a little bit more, encouraging connections. We don't talk about that. I think those are all within the larger concept that you've got in the policy. Functioning as a gateway. It's really more of an action item. I guess it's just it has a different take on it, but yeah.
Except that we then pull the rug out from under that by using generic words like, well, when it's appropriate and in other ways without specifying. I don't see that it adds anything to what we said above.
Do you want to suggest your wording to it? I kind of liked your wording.
You may if you want. I'd prefer to see the whole thing just go away rather than have the redundance there.
Okay, we have a...
I do think having something with connections or linkages would be important. That could be done in a multitude of ways, whether it be some kind of pedestrian connection or bicycle connection, or there's other things that could occur, or just the design and how it may make a nod to something that's historic in downtown. So encourage connections or linkages, I think, should be somehow in.
How about we be very simple and just say encourage connections and linkages to downtown, and that's all we say in that implementation policy. Craig, sorry.
I would just add that we should encourage those connections to follow the same design standards. Wide sidewalks, things like that.
I just have some new wording for that, just striking about half of what's there. It would read, design new developments immediately adjacent to downtown so that they improve connections to downtown, function as part of a gateway to downtown, and are coordinated with the downtown area plan.
Steve?
The wording that David came up with that I really liked was developments immediately adjacent to downtown should be consistent with the vision and goals for downtown. So getting rid of the design at the beginning.
My big concern about design, and that's why I was happy when somebody suggested planning instead of design before, is by the time it gets to design, developers invested a lot of time and effort in going through a lot of preliminary meetings with staff and DRC and everything else. Planning is really what we're dealing with, and that's overall concepts, mass use, that sort of thing. Design, detailing, that sort of thing, and that's beyond what we're here for.
So change the action verb to plan from design, so plan new development or something to that effect.
Jenny, does Craig's language get to what you're trying to say? Kurt?
I prefer Craig's language.
I'll read it again with the plan.
Okay.
Plan new developments immediately adjacent to downtown so that they improve connections to downtown, function as part of a gateway to downtown, and are coordinated with the downtown area plan.
How about all those in favor? Unanimous? Okay. So now we're on LU 13B. Locate and design development to the west of Main Street so it protects the mountain view from both Main Street and from the Main Street Littleton Boulevard gateway to downtown.
I happen to think that's a good one. It's very action-oriented. I just think west of Main Street seems a little weird to me because Main Street runs east and west. So west of Main Street and Santa Fe?
Are we saying west of Santa Fe on Bowles by then, really?
But Main Street ends there, so it is west of Main Street.
West of, well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was just afraid of the way it was worded might be confused as saying the west end of Main Street.
Any suggested language change? Should we
Just take
go
out
ahead and vote?
just say west of Main Street. That covers what Kurt was talking about. Main Street ends there, so anything west of there is
West of Main Street.
west of Main Street.
So all those in favor of LU 13B with a deletion of to the before west?
I have a question, though. where it says both Main Street and Main Street, Littleton Boulevard, gateway to downtown. So are you saying that if you're standing at the gateway to downtown on the west end of Main Street, anything that
East
we're
end.
going,
East End. Littleton Boulevard.
okay, but so this gateway at Littleton Boulevard and Main, is that the one that's?
Yeah, I think the intent on that is because that's a little higher than the...
Higher.
Right.
Although, when you drive down, we've done it multiple times, trying to figure out where does it stop. Actually, you can see the mountains until just a little bit beyond Merle's. So it actually is pretty far down the street, amazingly. I think the primary view is from the gateway, but I think it does continue all the way through.
So the real question is, when you're crossing the bridge coming into downtown, you passed the courthouse and you're taking in this view over the top of Carnegie Library, how high would a building have to be to block more of the mountain view than the Carnegie Library already does at that point?
Dick Farley actually looked at that, as I recall, when we looked at that analysis of that site. And because the site goes down to the west towards the river, and because it's farther away, I think we were up at 7 or 8 stories, as I recall. It wasn't terribly short.
What about on either side of Carnegie?
That would be shorter, yeah.
Right.
You may come down a little bit on that side, that's right.
Because what we're doing is imposing essentially an effective height restriction on that property by doing this.
And it does have an approved plan on it already, approved element, so it's
What height?
dealing with all those. It's fairly high. I don't remember what it is, but it's beyond the height limit.
I mean, if we do this, it's a what does that leave us? It leaves DRC with a little moral suasion to be able to say, look, the plan says we'd really like to maintain these views, but it's not going to have a whole lot of legal or practical effect. It's just something we need to keep in mind as we go through this.
Okay, all those in favor of goal LU 13B with the changes to delete to the? Seeing everyone? Then we move to goal LU, to policy LU 14. Cultural amenities such as art galleries and the Town Hall Arts Center should be promoted in order to strengthen downtown as a cultural center. And that was one of the suggestions of Dick Farley. So, any objections to that? Should we go ahead and vote? All those in favor of LU 14? Unanimous. So we go to implementation strategy LU 14A. Continue to work with the Merchants Association to promote downtown cultural and arts facilities and events.
Okay, I want to remind everybody of something. The Merchants Association does not necessarily have a homogeneous attitude about a lot of these events. There are merchants who think that things like the farmers markets and the street fairs obstruct access to their stores and divert attention, even compete directly with their stores. So my only concern is when we say the city's going to work with the Merchants Association, if a majority of the people active in the Merchants Association say, we don't want street fairs, they don't do our business any good, what do we do?
Jenny?
About the Friends of the Library and the Historical Museum, or there seems to be a group that is focused on trying to encourage more cultural amenities, and is that the right term, Friends of the
Library.
It is, and I wonder if you want to just make it more generic and just in terms of citizen organizations or citizens, if you want to broaden it a little bit, because I hadn't thought it's a good thought.
Yeah.
Can we just say promote downtown cultural and arts facilities and events? I mean, is that encompassing enough?
That's just reiterating what we already said. The nice thing about saying the Merchants Association, other cultural or arts organizations, that sort of thing, is at least there's some reason for having this second statement in here as an implementation strategy. And I wasn't trying to raise the specter of the merchants being split on this. I just want to make sure we understood that if it's only with the Merchants Association, we're limiting some of the things that the city might be able to do in promoting this. We just need to be aware of that.
Steve?
What about downtown merchants and citizen associations?
Or other cultural groups.
Or civic groups. Or
Just continue to promote.
Yeah. Downtown merchants and civic groups?
Or other civic groups, maybe?
All those,
Support
And-
that.
pardon?
I'd support that.
Okay, so all those in favor with the language changes? Seeing no objections, we can move to LU 15. And guess what? This is the last of the land use, with the exception of what we want to add. So LU 15 is new development should occur only in parcels large enough to accommodate the primary use and structures based on the framework and goals and policies of this plan. Steve?
Okay. The idea that Linda and I where this originally came up with, we got this off of the Castle Rock master plan, and we tried to trim down the words a little bit, and then when Dennis and Sarah Jane got a hold of it, they tried to trim it down a little bit more, and by the time all of us got done trimming, we basically trimmed everything right out of it. So let me read what is actually right out of the Castle Rock plan. Ensure that any new development occurs on parcels large enough to accommodate not only the primary use and structures, but also the necessary access, parking, landscaping, and buffering areas.
And if you want, we talked about this after the meeting, and you and I changed it, and I can read that if you like, so that it would read, ensure that new development can accommodate the primary use and structures as well as parking, setbacks, access, and landscaping based on the framework and goals and policies of this plan.
But if they don't, they're not going to get approved anyway, right?
Not necessarily. I imagine there could be a variance, but this would reduce, I think, the flexibility to approve a variance, because it wouldn't be consistent then with comp plan.
Well, I thought not being consistent with comp plan was a grounds for not approving it already. I'm trying to envision what this would stop and what the benefit of that is. I mean, parcels, and it's kind of generic, parcels large enough.
Jenny?
Right now, the PDO process, people will override what is in our zoning, and so this may be able to give a little more leverage to more grounding, that when these PDO projects come before us, that we can refer back to the comp plan as well as our zoning. And because a lot of these things, heights and different components, parking, they start to change.
But there are square foot limitations on a PDO, size of a PDO that tries to override zoning. I mean, and even a PDO can't change the use, can't change density unless it goes to 50,000 square feet. Then it can go up to a higher density. Dennis, or have I garbled that one? There are restrictions on a PDO. It's not like it automatically overrides zoning, and they are dependent on size of the parcel already. That's in zoning. It doesn't have to be in here.
Right.
I just have this vision of somebody with a small parcel on Main Street or a small parcel on Prince Street. Somebody being told, well, it may not be large enough to comply. Well, they apply, and they work with staff and DRC to look at what the requirements are within the comp plan and zoning and the downtown design standards and guidelines, and either it conforms or it doesn't. I just don't see what this is, and it comes across as being restrictive. New development shall only be on parcels large enough. It sounds like you're saying, don't come to us with small plans.
Although I think that there should be a viable hardship, as well as if there's a design opportunity that's going to benefit the city of Littleton, because there may be something that is proposed, and it's really going to be something helpful to our community, even though it might not be exactly. There should be some exceptions.
My comments, and I wrote this 3 weeks ago, is this really necessary to delete? I don't think we need it. LU 15, I would vote to delete it completely.
Yeah, Jenny, the thing that worries me about that is it starts to waffle. It starts to be subjective. It starts to say, well, you know, if there are special opportunities that come up, we can reconsider. And one of the things that we were trying to do, in addition to promoting it, to trying to saddle this wild horse that's both keep a traditional downtown but promote reasonable growth. One of it was to make sure that the process is transparent, is simple, is approachable. And I don't see it saying, well, let's create some waffle room so we can change our minds on something without having specific standards. I
So
just
can
don't
we
see
get
that
a
as being
sense
helpful.
of the,
Can you read that once again?
Yes. Ensure that new development can accommodate the primary use and structures, as well as parking, setbacks, access, and landscaping, based on the framework, goals, and policies of this plan?
so if we had a development like Mills, would that, because we're mentioning parking, would that,
That's what I was going to say. That seems to be the only new thing in it, is requiring that they have parking.
Steve, I don't have any objection with the overall approach to it, because that sounds like what we're saying comp plan is about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't know why it needs to be in land use as a specific policy. That's what we're saying comp plan is to do.
and to me, one of the intentions was to discourage assemblage of properties,
This
and
goes the
more
other
specifically
direction.
the R5 area.
But this goes the other direction.
Is the issue that it's redundant?
How many people support the general concept of what Sarah Jane was saying? I mean, we're just talking general concept.
I support the verbiage that Sarah Jane said, but again, being new, I'm not so sure it needs to be in this location either. If it's stated somewhere else and it's part of the rules and zoning, et cetera, then I could go either way on this vote. I could either use Sarah Jane's language or delete the thing.
I tend to agree. I like the way you said it, Sarah Jane. I'm thinking the way that it's stated in LU 15 may have some unintended consequences. One, the discouragement of trying to develop a small parcel, and especially in a historic district downtown area where infill property could be very valuable to the interests of the city, that it might discourage some creative development of those areas. So I think the way I heard it read, it's sort of a very broad description of what we're trying to do here. Mm-hmm. But I don't support this the way it's written here.
Keep something in mind. The more times you restate something with slight variations, the more opportunities for confusion and reinterpretation you create. For and against. I mean, it can go either way. But if you're going to state it where it belongs. In this case, I think that is the whole thrust of comp plan. But don't keep reiterating things because you open doors to other interpretations.
How about we go ahead and vote on Sarah Jane's language? And those who want to keep it in, as was read, just raise your hand. So we,
Voting on Sarah Jane's language? Or
Yes,
keep it in as
Sarah
read?
Jane's.
Sarah Jane's language. So we have Matt, Kurt, Dave, and Jenny against. So it's half. So the rules say if it's half, the motion fails. So,
You make a motion to delete it?
sure.
Delete
Or to enhance LU2 with the important points from it? Then it's not duplicative, but we have what we think are the important points within the document.
Sarah Jane, is there some place in the forward or the intro or strategies or something where we essentially say that same thing? Because, as I say, that seems to me that basically is what we're saying about comp plan, that what's in comp plan is expected to be applied to new development on all those different categories, and even more than what's in that statement.
I think that we can certainly take the notions that are in this and incorporate it into the introduction without much problem.
As a general approach to comp plan. I'd rather see it there than split up into land use. And I'll admit that the thing that really bothered me in the first place was this whole reference to parcels large enough. It tends to have a dampening effect on people looking at the city and potential development.
So we have a proposal on the table to move the concepts from LU15 to LU2 at this time. So do we have any support or comments to that? And then we'll address your concerns, Dave.
I would actually agree with what Dave said, that if it's in the foreword or the introduction section, that'd be fine with me too.
So do we have a motion
Or I
to
should
move
say-
those concepts into the introduction?
So moved.
Okay, so the motion is to move it to introduction. How many people in favor? Okay.
But just to clarify, we'll be deleting LU15.
Right. There's not enough room on these pages to take notes.
I got it.
So that takes us to the end of land use and urban design. Do we have any goals that commissioners want to add?
I would just state what I stated last time. I'm not sure it says anything about any land uses that we don't want. So is there, I'd suggest that we need to add something to say there's things we specifically don't want.
Like what, for instance?
Certain kinds of businesses.
Strip clubs or that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Suzanne, where does that put us?
Well, I think it's all provided for in the zoning, so it would be more that you wouldn't take specific uses, but you could say, we encourage no further industrial, or we encourage industrial at this end of downtown, or that kind of thing, more than we would call out uses, because that's really more of a zoning issue.
So it's not necessary in this comp plan?
Well, I mean, you could do a comp plan where you called out where you wanted certain zone categories. I think we've had discussion about that, and this is the plan that has been drafted. So I don't know. Does that mean that discussion, the commissioners decided not to go that route? But you could have a comp plan with a land use map attached, and
I just think back to the battle the city had with a little outfit called Crystals years ago. I don't know if you can actually, if you all are aware of it or remember, it sold sex toys and dirty movies and stuff, I hear. But I think we lost that, didn't we?
no. But that had to do with us saying that type of business needs to be in an industrial zone, and them saying we're not that type of business. So they were saying we're not a sexually oriented business. We were saying you are a sexually oriented business, therefore you must go to an industrial zone.
But I thought we lost that case.
No, we won.
So Matt is asking to add specific land uses into this plan. Do we have any favor for that, since that land use is included in zoning?
If it's in zoning, I'd drop it.
Okay. Okay. For me, it's kind of hard to figure out what's missing until we see all of the changes. So, unless we have very specific proposals, can we go ahead and get the changes from Dennis based on our discussions, and then at the next meeting, just do a blanket approval, and if we have any additions, we can go ahead and do that at the next meeting? What do you guys think about that? Because, there's so many changes we made, it's just kind of confusing. Yes, no?
Well,
I think that
presumably,
makes sense to see what changes we have and then figure out what's missing.
Okay. Do we all agree on that?
well,
I'm sorry. Should we just go ahead and take a quick straw poll?
this is all just progress, right? I mean, it's not like we've done this, therefore we're never going to talk about it again. As we go along, if we say, oh, gee, we've already said that someplace else, or maybe it's better put someplace, in a different section, we can still do that. None of this is cast in stone.
Right, but we still want to keep moving forward.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so have we adequately, any other additions that we want to talk about right now? Seeing none, can we move to the circulation network? Hey, 2 sections done, guys. We're moving. All right, so the goal of the circulation network is downtown will be simple to navigate and easily accessible for pedestrians, bicyclists, drivers, and those who use public transportation. As an important element of the public realm, the circulation network will provide a family-friendly environment for the mobility of people of all ages and abilities and will be compatible with downtown's small character.
Linda, we were thinking that you wanted to revisit the question of looking at each one after you got through land use. Do you want to do that?
Yes. Yeah, let's do that. Any preferences on how you want to address these goals and policies? We had talked about after we finish land use, we'd look at exceptions rather than addressing each policy. And then we went through historic preservation. It just seemed easier to go through every single policy. So how do you guys want to proceed?
Looking through this circulation network, I don't see anything that stands out as a big red flag. Does anybody have any problems with any of it?
I've got comments with virtually every item on there. Yeah, I know, it doesn't surprise you, Tony.
No, we do. So,
Well,
motion to
what's
push
the difference,
forward
really?
as we have?
Right.
Yeah, so proceed, goal, and policy.
I
And
think
implement.
there's a succinct number of policies here that we can
Yeah.
afford to go through them each.
Okay, so do we all agree that we'll go over each one of them individually? Okay. So let's talk about that goal.
I would just suggest that we strike family from family-friendly environment and perhaps just say friendly environment. Is it necessary to say family-friendly? Are we discriminating against the non-families?
I don't know.
You know, that was one of my questions. I mean, how does a circulation network create a family-friendly environment?
What makes it a family-friendly environment?
Right, yeah.
And in the end, we say people of all ages and abilities, so we've covered it twice.
What do you think?
Well, I usually like the word family-friendly, but that's kind of my background, is that a lot of times I find that our downtown cities in general are not often as family-friendly as like the suburbs. And so unfortunately, a lot of families do not frequent as often the downtown centers. And I guess I would hope that our city of Littleton would be able to accommodate families better on our sidewalks and have a more continuous network.
As someone who's led families, 3 generations down here for downtown events, I guarantee you the downtown circulation network is more family-friendly than most of the residential neighborhoods in Littleton with sidewalks that are 18 inches to 3 feet wide. Trust me.
So how many people want to get rid of the family as part of family-friendly on this goal? So we have Jenny, Linda, and Craig not wanting that. Tony, you didn't vote?
I'm still thinking about it. I don't see why we can't just get rid of a family-friendly environment and just use it. The network will provide for the mobility of people of all ages and abilities. I mean, not just dump the word family, but the whole phrase.
What do you guys think?
I like it.
Yeah.
Sure. I like it.
Yeah.
So all those in favor of dropping a family-friendly environment and starting with people of all ages and abilities? All those in favor? And seeing Jenny is against that?
Sorry, Jenny.
I would like to make some...
Can we back up a little bit? Can somebody explain to me 2 things? What do we mean by simple to navigate and easily accessible, and what about downtown is not simple to navigate and easily accessible now?
I don't think anything is. I think it's navigable, and I mean, there's curb cuts and wide sidewalks, and I think it's rather pedestrian friendly and wheelchair accessible. I don't see an issue with downtown.
But wouldn't that be the point of the plan, to prevent it
Should
from?
maintain it and keep it that
Right.
way, yeah. I mean, I think it needs to be stated.
I'm more concerned about definition. It's easy to say things like, well, it's kind of like family friendly. What's that mean? Well, to different people, easy, simple to navigate. What does that mean?
There are some rules that the ADA has that the cities need to comply with, and as far as I know, Littleton's already complied with it as much as possible.
Some exceptions.
We did toy with the idea of saying we'll continue to do this because they're doing it currently. We kind of dropped that just as, to go to kind of a more general statement. We can go either way on that.
I will say that as far as our city goes, that Main Street, I think, is great as far as accessibility. But when you start to get off from Main Street, we have a lot of things that we can do to upgrade to make our city more accessible. There's a lot of opportunity I think we have out there to work on.
So maybe we can take this sentence by sentence?
Let's back up. And what I'm asking is, what do we mean by easy to navigate, or simple to navigate, easily accessible? What do we mean? Easily accessible, do we mean ADA compliant? Because we don't have a whole lot of choice but to comply with that anyway.
But our policies and implementation strategies should explain what those definitions are.
Right. Otherwise, it's a feel-good phrase that doesn't have any substantive effect for the future. It has no binding effect, nothing you can point to and say, this makes it more easily accessible, this isn't easily accessible enough, and therefore it needs to be improved.
So how would you change the wording?
As with Tony, I'm not sure. It never occurred to me that we needed to.
Jenny?
Should we just kind of a poll, whether we agree on the language and then go right into our policies and implementation, because we do talk a lot about the details.
Hopes that will explain.
Yes, the hopes that it does explain.
And we can revisit the goal then at a later time.
If it would pass right now as it is, I'm going to try that first.
I had just written down when I was reviewing this a couple weeks ago, too, I just said, I think what we're trying to say is all parts of downtown will be accessible by car, bicycle, pedestrian, and the physically disabled. And streets, neighborhoods, and entries shall be clearly marked. And I just thought there's a more direct way to say, I think, what this goal is saying.
Dennis, do I even want to ask the question about the ramps down to Little's Creek? Are they ADA compliant?
Yeah, I think they must be. They're new enough that I think they have to be. They seem like they have that right angle on them. They probably are.
So we have a number of different motions on the table.
Yeah.
We have one motion to address the goal at a later time. We have Steve's motion to look at this the way it exists and see if it'll pass, and then Craig's language change. So we've got three different things, and
Was one of them with the family-friendly environment struck out?
That's already been done.
Yes. So, as is.
Yeah.
I second Steve's motion to proceed and come back to the goal.
I'd take it as is without the family-friendly environment.
I kind of like Craig's language.
I like it as is.
I'm out there.
Well, we'll take them in logical order. If we vote on Steve's and the vote is to move on and come back, then it's done. We can come back to either of the other two alternatives.
Okay, so let's vote to move on and come back at a later time. So we have motion carries. So let's go straight to the policy. CN1, street should be designed to balance the multimodal needs of motorists, pedestrians, and bicyclists. Oh my gosh, no comments? So should we just vote?
Balance?
All those in favor?
Balance? Someone want to explain to me what balance is going to mean? And then, look, I'm not trying to be obstructionist. I'm trying to get something definitive so it means something when somebody goes to apply it a year from now or 3 years from now. So my question is, what do we mean by balance?
We're about to provide for the multimodal needs of motorists, because that's what balance means, right? That we're going to provide for each need.
each need and not favor one over the other necessarily. So it's kind of where we were heading.
Are they in perfect balance, though?
Probably not.
You can't, maybe that's why balance is there, because
I don't think you can perfectly.
I'll give you an
Cost benefit.
example, and Sarah Jane has mentioned this about Prince Street. We've got enough width on Prince Street. You can have parking on both sides of the street. You can have traffic, one lane each direction, and there's also enough width to do a designated bicycle lane, one way or another. And there are different ways of changing the street profile to allow that. You don't have that option on Main Street. There is not enough room.
Dave, we have Matt's suggestion to change balance to provide. How many people favor that?
I think that's a good.
So Dave is against. So now should we address that whole strategy, or the whole policy of CN1?
With provide.
With provide? All those in favor of that policy with provide?
I just wanted to clarify that I would replace balance with provide for.
Okay. All those in favor of that policy with those changes? Are you? So Dave is against. So we have CN1A, create a complete streets program that is tailored to downtown Littleton, and that includes improvements to sidewalks, landscape areas, bicycle accommodations, on-street parking, and vehicle lanes, all of which generally fit into the existing rights-of-way. And I think one of our discussions was to talk about the complete streets at a later time, but if everybody agrees that it should be in here, then...
Do we all know what a complete streets program necessarily entails? Or are we just talking about taking principles from a complete streets approach as tailored or suitable for downtown? I have no problem with the latter, but I'm not going to buy a pig in a poke and commit to a complete streets program without understanding it.
Yeah, the way I thought that this should be written is that it would be, if we decided to adopt a complete streets policy, which is what a lot of cities are doing now, it addresses Dave's concern before about different streets can accommodate different multimodal needs. It's a context-sensitive design, they call it, where Main Street may not have the room to accommodate dedicated bike lanes, and it's evaluated on a case-by-case basis, and that's consistent with the complete streets policy. The policy basically says, look at, when you design a street, look at the needs of pedestrians, bicycles, and the disabled equally with the needs of vehicles. So that's basically what a complete streets policy is.
And we have a definition in the glossary, too, on page 33, which says, complete streets that are designed and operated to enable safe access for all users. Pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists are able to safely move along and across a complete street. The definition we got online.
So Craig, how would you change the wording in this?
I would simply change create to adopt and program to policy.
Could we say adapt complete streets policies?
I think by definition they do. They're adapted to the design needs of the street.
See, I like the reference to context, and that's one of the things I liked about the Peoria, Arizona Old Downtown Revitalization Plan. They went through the different profiles, the different situations, and looked at things like street width, traffic volume, traffic speed, how that related to sidewalks and separation and bicycle use and the kinds of buildings and businesses and sidewalk activity. I like the concept. I'm just leery of a broad stroke complete streets program, whatever, that doesn't recognize those contextual differences. And I'll give you one example. Prince Street has a higher volume than most of the other streets, except for Alamo, within the downtown area. There are ways of accommodating bicycles that are probably going to be different on those two streets. But then you talk about Santa Fe, which is bordering downtown and leading into downtown. You know what? There are some streets that you're not going to have bicycle traffic along it. Exactly.
So we have the motion on the floor to adopt a complete street program, or not program, but policies that are tailored to downtown Littleton. So one of my concerns with this is that we really haven't discussed complete streets enough, so we're kind of we're recommending adoption of something that we haven't really studied. So that's just my concern.
We have had a number of discussions. I think that it's true. It's not something that we've all read and are all that familiar with. It's more of a technical issue.
If we talked about, if we modified the end of this to talk about what you were saying, Craig, about context, and then is there something we can reference it to so it isn't just hanging out there, but
okay, let me read this. I added the context-sensitive thing in here. Adopt a complete streets policy is tailored to downtown Littleton, comma, is context-sensitive, and includes sidewalks, landscape areas, bicycle accommodations, on-street parking, and vehicle lanes, all of which should generally fit within the existing rights-of-way.
I like the insertion of the context sensitive. My remaining comment was going to be generally fit. What we're talking about stretching the rights away. I mean, it's kind of like Yoda. There is no try, there is only do. It either fits or it doesn't fit.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think if we struck generally and put should fit, which should fit.
Do we even need that clause?
Will fit.
Can we delete it?
I just strike out all of which generally, or all of and generally. It says which fit within the existing rights of way. Unless, Dennis, do you see some possibility where we consider changing rights of way with?
No, I don't. And luckily, when Charlie and his team have looked at the streets, they think there are enough options, even though we have fairly narrow right-of-way, that they actually can accommodate those things typically. So in some cases, it's going to be a shared situation. It could be something else, but yeah, I think we're okay.
And again,
I'm trying to avoid uncertainty.
Craig?
A complete streets policy doesn't even mean that you have to put sidewalks on it. It's completely context sensitive. It just means that you need to consider the access needs for different modes.
Yeah, given that the complete streets concept, for example, the city of Centennial embraced it, but then half of their territory is still waiting to be developed. We have a totally different situation, and the reference to generally fit or that sort of thing, just it's unsettling. It creates uncertainty for developers and anybody else.
So
I would support that amendment to strike generally and all of.
strike generally and all of,
So
which will fit within.
fit within the rights of way.
All right, so let's vote on that, on the entire policy. Unanimous. So let's go to CM2. Bicycles and pedestrians should be comfortably accommodated on downtown streets and should share the roads with vehicles. So I don't like the word comfortably.
I struck that one.
Okay. So all those in favor of striking comfortably?
Can I question the share the road with vehicles?
Going to have pedestrians share the road?
And that was for crosswalk?
Pedestrians.
At crosswalks?
For crosswalks, it might, yeah. It might be
That's not really sharing the road.
maybe a better way to say that.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. I mean, that takes away, and that's why I raised earlier the question of the difference in character of traffic and volume, speed, that sort of thing, between Santa Fe and Prince Street and Alamo. There are very different conditions there, and at least on Santa Fe, shouldn't be any talk about the road or the pedestrians and bicycles sharing the road. Now, if we want to talk about a right-of-way or something, maybe there's a way of doing it to capture what we're looking for, but
Do you have any proposed language to change that?
I would put a period after streets, strike the rest.
So we have,
How about we just strike and pedestrians?
Well, I think it's a little bit duplicative, but
I mean, bicycles are allowed on the streets.
Would you want to change streets to public right-of-way? So pedestrians and bicycles should be accommodated in downtown's public right-of-way?
that makes sense. It gives us a little more flexibility.
More flexibility in terms of, so.
And what about putting safely in there before accommodated?
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last one.
Putting safely where comfortably is?
Okay. Thank you.
And what about the deleting and should share the road with vehicles? What do you guys,
State law.
with state law? So you suggest keeping it in?
Well, a bicycle is a vehicle in this state.
Yeah, unfortunately, a street legal electric cart, according to city council, is not. I'm still a little uneasy about the idea that the way things stand now, bicycles apparently mix better with motorized vehicles, with gasoline-powered vehicles on streets than golf carts, which are bigger, more visible, and drive faster. And so I'm a little concerned about that.
Well, we have on the floor changing this policy to bicycles and pedestrians should be safely accommodated on downtown's public right-of-ways and should share the road with vehicles. So, any other changes, and should we vote on that?
I don't want pedestrians sharing the road with vehicles.
Well, I guess the point is they actually do in a crosswalk or, and if you change it to public right-of-way instead of street, then they.
Well, it says to share the road with vehicles. I mean,
Do you even need the last clause, is what he's saying, having changed to rights-of-way.
Stop right there.
Right.
All right, so who agrees with this policy deleting and should share the road with vehicles and all the other modifications? All those in favor? Everyone? Okay, implementation strategy CN2A, implement the pedestrian bicycle master plan. And I just want to make a quick comment that since we don't know what's in the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, can we really say we want to follow the recommendations? Because will that be coming to planning commission, or how does that handle?
No, it won't actually. It's going to be a departmental policy, so it will not come to either city council or planning commission. We'll have the 2 open houses and we'll incorporate comment, but it will be policy. So it's something you may want to think about in terms of.
well, if they approve it, we got to follow it anyways, no matter what they approve.
You know, this is endorsing it before we even know what it is. What's the timeline on that, Dennis, for finalizing it?
I think fairly quickly. I think they'll have the open house tomorrow night. I think that they're looking at some changes after that. But I think they're looking at a fairly quick turnaround on that and actually start doing some implementation. In this case, it's going to be mostly construction. Just what are their priorities for widening sidewalks and making improvements and doing signage. I think it's a lot of it. So it's.
I've got no problem considering this later when we know what the plan's going to say.
Well, but I guess I'd suggest, since this document is sort of instructions for the future, couldn't we rewrite this to say something like the pedestrian bicycle master plan should follow the goals of the comp plan?
What if it doesn't?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, you don't know.
Which is easier to change, the bicycle master plan or the comp plan?
Bicycle master plan.
So we could approve it here and then ask them to change the bicycle master plan later.
Or we could sit on it and wait and see what they come up with.
We can probably defer that for a few weeks.
We can certainly defer that, and just see what they are, and particularly if you've had the opportunity to look at it and see what it is.
So all those in favor of, Jenny?
I was curious, Dennis, will the comp plan be looked at as far as moving forward with the pedestrian and bicycle master plan, or is the group that's working on that, will they be referencing this?
I don't know if they are or not. And certainly staff is.
Okay.
Charlie and David are, and I don't know if the consultants are or not. I think as they finalize, they will be. We'll talk about general concepts, but certainly staff has been following your progress.
So the suggestion is to defer this to a later time? Anybody, so can we vote on that? Jenny wants to keep it in? Okay, that takes us to CN3. So when we say we're deferring it, do we want to readdress this at a later point, or especially as we see the content of this? So maybe as we approve other components of the draft.
Are some of you able to come to the open house Wednesday? Okay. I would think even in 2 weeks you might be able to have enough sense of what's in it and are you comfortable with it, and is it something, or maybe think about this may not be what you want to say. You may want to rewrite this too. So
Yeah, if I thought it was going to be drawn out, I wouldn't have even brought it up. I mean, I'd have tried to look for some weasel words like to the extent that it's consistent with comp plan, which we seem to be doing a lot, but.
Weasel words.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
that was in my mind.
that takes us to CN3. Sidewalks should be compliant with ADA standards. Steve?
I was looking at changing compliant to meet or exceed.
What?
meet or exceed.
Meet or exceed. Suzanne, how often do they go in and change the ADA standards?
I don't think very often.
There's another problem with ADA. Actually, Jenny, what's the official? It's ADAP, whatever it is. There are, within the construction industry, a couple of variations on that. If you're doing it.
Like ANSI.
Right, and they don't always agree. I've run afoul of that on the last 2 buildings I've done. We need to be really careful about what we're committing to.
However, I think it would be good to at least state it in here, because I've walked along our various streets, and there's definitely disconnects. So to at least address it and put it in here, even though you're right that there are there's a little bit of variation, but at least to call it out means we need to address it.
Yeah, so I'd like to change compliant to meet or exceed.
Suzanne, any issues with that, do you think?
Well, a lot of times ADA changes they're not just made, I mean, the ADA doesn't go into place and then all of a sudden everybody has to retrofit. They go into place as you pull a building permit, do a curb cut, maybe redesign a street, that kind of thing. So I guess my concern is that if you say meet or exceed, does that mean you expect it to meet current standards now, even if you haven't done a street
Probably deal with that under
redesign?
implementation. I know Charlie's concern is, look, whenever we go through and we're planning some kind of reconstruction or repairs or whatever they do, the city does try to upgrade where it isn't meeting standards. I think what we want to be a little wary of is committing to, okay, any place that it isn't, within 6 months, 12 months, whatever, we're going to change it. I think Charlie would run screaming out of the room if we said that, and I don't blame him.
Right.
So the proposal is to change compliant to meet or exceed. Should we just vote on that?
Do we need to say streets and intersections? Or crosswalks or something? Sorry, it says sidewalks.
The rules are there.
Yeah, that's.
So should we vote on the policy with a meet or exceed, or just vote on the meet or exceed?
Vote on meet or exceed.
Okay, so meet or exceed. All those in favor of including that language? Got 2, Steve, and so Steve and Dave are against that, so.
We're for that.
We were for
For
that.
that, sorry.
Come on, the one time I'm doing something admirable.
I think the word's compliant, just say it all.
Yeah.
I don't think,
Okay.
I mean, meet or exceed, you're going to meet it if they're compliant. Exceed,
I don't know how you,
They're not
Yeah, and bear something else in mind now that I'm thinking about this. ADA is not self-enforcing. Okay, it's not, unless Suzanne's going to kind of override me here. Basically, ADA standards are referenced in rules that are self-enforcing. So the nice thing about saying we're going to be compliant with ADA standards is it's just the standards. It's not the various interpretations that other legally binding codes are going to impose on us.
So how about we vote on CN3 as written?
Mm-hmm.
All those in favor? And Steve is against. And CN3A is design and construct improvements to the sidewalk network to conform with ADA standards.
I'd like to just ask my fellow commissioners a question. Do we feel collectively that all streets in the downtown should have sidewalks?
Have sidewalks?
Should have sidewalks, every street in the downtown, or there should be any streets that don't have sidewalks? Because right now there are some that don't. I guess I'm just trying to get a general sense of how to write this.
I think that what's existing is existing, and we don't need to, we shouldn't put the onus on them. Okay, that should be grandfathered in, but if there's any new development going in that area, there should be a sidewalk.
For example, with this one, referencing back to what I was saying about Charlie and his, what are we telling him he has to do? If we change the language on this and say, improvements to the sidewalk network shall conform with ADA standards, that takes away the idea that we're telling Charlie, go out there and change everything right now. On the other hand, it then says exactly the same thing as the policy does, so what's the point?
Should we add a policy based on that concept into the plan?
Well, right now, what we're looking at is a policy. Sidewalks should be compliant with ADA standards. And then we have an implementation strategy that says design and construct improvements to the sidewalk network to conform with ADA standards.
It says the same
thing. Says the same thing.
So I would suggest, following on my question, was why don't we just say all new projects, all new street projects, all new redevelopment projects will include sidewalks.
That are ADA compliant.
I think that's a good idea, but again, who's paying for it? If the city's got to pay for it, I'm going to vote it out. If the developer's paying for it, yeah, sure.
Okay, so if there's a new sewer project that requires reconstruction of a street like Rio Grande, this policy would suggest or require that it have sidewalks when it goes back in again, so there would be a cost to the city. Whereas if there was a redevelopment project on a site like Nevada Place, they would be
what that property is
required.
on the east side of Rio Grande, and who owns that?
Railroad property,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
But we can include the here within the implementation strategy.
Right now, the policy just says that sidewalks will be compliant with ADA. It doesn't say there will be a sidewalk everywhere. That's not the policy. The policy is only sidewalks, where they occur, will be compliant with ADA standards. Now, if we want to tackle things like, should there be sidewalks on both sides of the streets? Should sidewalks be wide enough to accommodate a couple and their dog passing or walking? That totally separate issue from the policy we're talking about, which is sidewalks should comply with ADA standards. So unless we have something we think we need to do as an implementation strategy for that, then we're really talking about moving on to a different policy.
Well, let's address Craig's suggestion to delete CN3A as written and include the language, all new street projects and redevelopment will include sidewalks and that are ADA compliant. Did I get that language right?
That's correct, yep.
What do you guys think of that?
I would suggest that's a policy and not an implementation strategy.
And I'll give you an example. Right now, north of the overflow lot for RTD, between Rio Grande and Sycamore, just south of Berry, there are, two sets of apartments, 3 buildings. They have sidewalks out in front. I don't know what their sidewalk situation is out in the back on the east side along Rio Grande, because those are mostly under-building parking. So are we saying if somebody...
I don't think there's anything along
Right, so that's my point. Is this going to then imply that if somebody would come in and do one of those two street frontage buildings, they'd be required to put sidewalks on both sides?
Depends on the streets. We do have sidewalks in Rio Grande now just because of the street reconstruction project. So the city in this case did put them in as part of the reconstruction.
But not alongside those Hill Street buildings there, those apartment buildings.
There are sidewalks there now, yeah.
They have a lot of curb cuts.
There are a lot of curb cuts, particularly in front of the shops that are there. So it's hard to tell that there are sidewalks now. And it's getting quite a bit of traffic.
Check that out.
So can we vote on Craig's motion, and then we'll address Matt's suggestion to make it a policy instead of an implementation strategy.
I guess I'd like to hear if that goal or that policy is acceptable, whether or not it's an implementation strategy or a policy.
The way that this was written, all of the implementation strategies start with a verb, and I think that that's maybe what Matt is reacting to.
Maybe to respond to Matt, you could say
So you can
something
just
like,
flip it.
include sidewalks in all.
Let's look at the wording here again. It says, design and construct improvements to the sidewalk network. That means if there's an existing sidewalk, it's part of the network. And any improvement to that needs to be ADA, must meet ADA standards. I don't think I have a problem with that.
But what I've heard is that that is substantially similar to CN3.
Well, it is substantially similar, but it kind of defines it a little bit better. And it says anything that you're going to an existing network and improving that, it has to be ADA comparable.
Which is implementation, relative to implementation, because it says fairly, or maybe we can say it even more clearly, we're saying when you go to do improvements to, they will be compliant, rather than saying you will go out there and change everything right now or 6 months or whatever.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that this is an improvement situation. If they're improving existing stuff, it has to be ADA compliant, which I don't have a problem with. In fact, I like that. It's not saying that you're going to put a new sidewalk here, a new sidewalk there, or if somebody does an existing building that doesn't have a sidewalk, he's got to put in 20 feet of concrete in front of his place.
In which case,
Let's address Craig's language and then decide whether we want to delete CN3A or keep CN3A. Yeah, languages, all new street projects and redevelopment will include sidewalks that are ADA compliant, and then we should change will to should.
Or I think to respond to Matt's concern of trying to follow the format, say include sidewalks that are ADA compliant in all new street projects and development.
So are those in favor of that as a, should we go ahead and vote as a separate policy, or should we do that separately?
I would suggest that as a policy.
Okay, so all those in favor of a new policy based on that language? So we have Jenny, Kurt, Dave, and Tony against, so that fails. Okay, now the CN3A, how about we just address, do we delete it or do we keep that language?
Tony's suggestion is we keep it as is.
I suggest we keep it as is.
All right, those in favor of keeping it as is? And it's Linda, Steve, and Dave. Steve. So it's just Linda and Dave against? All right, so that gets us to CN4, and we're running kind of short of time. So pedestrian and bicycle connections should be comfortable, safe, comfortable, efficient, and inviting. Again, I have a problem with comfortable.
I'm waiting for somebody to describe inefficient.
I do like the word safe.
I don't think anybody's going to argue on that.
That, Jenny, I think was your suggestion. So pedestrian and bicycle connections should be safe, efficient, and inviting.
Okay, so I'll turn my question the other way because Tony was about to anyway. Describe efficient.
Okay, how can sidewalks be efficient?
As opposed to?
Or connections?
Example, in my mind at least, is the sidewalk that is half a block north of here, or south of here. It looks wonderful in a site plan. It's this curvilinear little sidewalk that goes back and forth, and it's not efficient at all. And if you're blind, or if you're trying to get somebody in a hurry, someplace in a hurry, you're not going to do this little circular path. Efficient seems like it goes directly the way people are walking, and it doesn't look good on a site plan necessarily, but it's the way people walk.
You've never walked behind my daughter, obviously. Okay.
The one going right across Littleton Boulevard, or right across Main Street, as you come over the train tracks where you've got the crosswalk in the middle of the street, that's efficient.
Yeah, Charlie's actually thought about putting a crossing in there because it is efficient and feels a little safer because it's a little farther away from the intersection.
Remembering that efficient for one purpose is going to be deadly dull for somebody else. That's why you end up with curving sidewalks, is to provide some. Look, I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm trying to come up with something that where we're anticipating the consequences of what we're doing. And if we say all sidewalks are going to be arrow straight, okay, that's different from saying in some circumstances you want them to meander. The sidewalk through Bega Park meanders. I don't want somebody coming through making that straight.
Sure. No, I agree. So I just think it needs to go where people walk, and in a way that they do walk. But through Bega, I agree. It's very comfortable through there, and it's a gentle enough curve that it's not inefficient. Although I do find myself cutting across the radius a little bit.
So all those in favor of the language as is, deleting comfortable and adding safe? And so that's Dave is against? Okay, implementation strategy, CM4A, design sidewalks to be at least 5 foot wide. Craig, that's your...
I'm voting.
All right, well, then let's vote.
Possible?
Everywhere?
What about changing design to provide?
Yeah, I guess my general question is, okay, we keep saying design this, design. Okay, so we've designed it. Now what? Is designing an implementation? That's why Steve at least is heading toward something a little more substantive.
Would the plan work better?
No, I'm not even sure that does.
Sidewalks shall be at least 5 feet wide.
Supposed to be, okay.
Well, I would say where possible, because we've had a situation where we couldn't get a 5
If I suggested this, I'd almost suggest that we take it out. I'm not sure that this needs to be in here.
But in support of you suggesting it, I think this is the definition of efficient. We're defining what efficient is. It's wide enough for two people or 3 people or a person on a bike, that kind of thing. That's what makes it efficient.
But at the same time, it is covered by other policies in here, including complete streets, where you look at...
Another example, there's a sidewalk behind the Libby Borth Center leading to the dead-end street that is South Nevada, where it crosses Little's Creek. That sidewalk is generously 30 inches wide. On the other hand, nobody walks down behind the Libby Borth Center, with the rare exception of when they come down there instead of Prince or Curtis coming to a special event after having parked in ACC. Are we really saying that I guess my concern is, are we saying every sidewalk in the city needs to be 5 feet wide?
That's what it says.
Yeah, I know that's what it says. Do we really want to say that?
And Craig, you support deleting that?
I would.
Because it's covered elsewhere?
I think it's a context-sensitive thing, going back to, I'd rather see continuous ADA accessible 3-foot sidewalks and more of them in places where 5 foot doesn't fit than to require 5 feet and in some cases not be able to do it.
Is there a standard on this?
I don't know, I was just thinking back to the one we did with the dentist. What happened there? There was a sidewalk issue, wasn't there?
There is a 5-foot standard, and we try and widen them to the extent we can. In some cases, they're actually wider than that, as I think Suzanne was asking. But and that's one thing that came out of the neighborhood meeting that you had with the Northwest neighborhood. Is that
I think it was narrower there because of the curve of the road.
Retaining wall, when it got up to the retaining wall.
They talked about pushing the retaining wall back, and then they also talked about narrowing the street. I think it ended up being very expensive to push the retaining wall back and had some problems. So I think the city pulled back on that. I think they are still thinking about, narrowing the street a little bit and pushing the sidewalk out into the street.
So can we vote on this to delete it?
Can I make a suggestion? Because I do think it's a good goal to have sidewalks that are wider, and I heard somebody else say that if we added at the end wherever possible, that might address the concern that we're trying to do it everywhere.
Where appropriate?
Yeah.
Possible and appropriate.
Craig hit on the essential element here, and that's context. Trust me, there are neighborhoods in this town where nobody walks, and not because there aren't sidewalks. I mean, they just don't. So tailoring the sidewalk to the kind of and amount of frequency of traffic context makes sense. Dictating flat out, it'll be 5 feet, tell that to Aberdeen Village. I want to see somebody push that one.
So the suggestion is to change the wording to sidewalks shall be at least 5 foot wide wherever possible. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Could we add an action verb to provide sidewalks that are at least 5 feet wide wherever possible? Or provide? No. Provide, is that right? Or I forget the word.
Okay. So are those in favor with those changes? Dave's against? And CN4B, locate and design sidewalks so they provide logical, obvious, continuous, and efficient connections. I mean, I don't understand what that says.
Is that really necessary?
Can we delete this?
Logical? Obvious?
Continuous and efficient.
I like continuous.
And no, seriously, because Linda raised that, or maybe it was Jenny, raised that question 8 to 9 months ago, especially in the north end of the downtown area, where sidewalks aren't continuous. And that was one of the reasons we talked about this. So continuity makes sense.
So should we change it to say locate and design sidewalks so that they are continuous and efficient connections? Or
Provide.
And provide efficient
So they provide continuous and efficient.
The only illogical I can think of is the sidewalk continues along here, and then it suddenly stops and jumps across the street, and that would be covered by continuous, I think.
So that would be removing logical and obvious.
Right. So,
I'm good with that.
Good with that.
all right, all those in favor with those changes of CN4B? We got everyone? Yeah?
It happens.
CN4C, improve pedestrian and bicycle connections over the railroad tracks to the east and across Santa Fe Drive to the west. All those in favor?
How's that going to happen?
Does a cross necessarily mean above or below?
What kind of bridge are we going to build to make that happen?
Yeah, I think it's, all options are
Bridge over
open.
the railway, I'll tell you that right now.
Well, actually,
Oh,
I
we
think
talked about it.
there's one in
We
planning.
talked about it, a couple different options. I guess I'd like to see us,
My experience in the construction industry tells me that there's a pecking order. And you got the sewers, and you got the water, and you got electricity, you got telephone, cable TV, and gas. And the railroad trumps them all. Period.
but it's doable. I mean, we've talked about this one we even talked about with Charlie Boston, and there were a couple of things that we were looking at for across the railroad tracks. One was an actual additional foot/bicycle bridge across the same existing structure that conveys the water from Little's Creek across the railroad tracks. The other one was, because this came up largely because of the narrowness of the side and the proximity of the sidewalks on the existing bridge connecting the east and west traffic across the railroad tracks, that it's a little scary, dangerous, whatever, depending on your confidence. And there are things you can do there. Either put another sidewalk or bridge structure onto that bridge. You can do things like widening the sidewalks and putting some kind of a splash barrier. There are ways of doing it. And I think what we've avoided here is trying to direct towards specific ways. We're just recognizing that there's that. My other concern was, the other thing we had talked about was improving connections from the downtown area across the railroad tracks, not just where it exists now, down at the Little's Creek crossing or the highway crossing to Littleton Boulevard, but also to connect Geneva Park across to Slaughterhouse Gulch and the trail. So that would be not just improving, that would be adding and improving.
Steve?
What Dave was referring to there is on the south side of the bridge going over the train track, is the sidewalk there is very narrow on the south side. On the north side, it's a reasonable width, but on the south side.
Talking about widening the sidewalk and decreasing the lane size of the traffic?
Well, there are a couple ways you could do that.
Okay, there's a couple ways you can do that, but let me explain. The railroad ain't going to like anything that's going to disrupt their rail traffic, period.
And this
They're gonna
wouldn't.
say no.
And this wouldn't. That's not. We're not talking about anything that's going to disrupt rail traffic. That's why we put the bridge over in the underpass in the first place. But there are a couple things you can do with that. One of them is widening the sidewalk. The other is some kind of a splash guard. Coincidentally, while the sidewalk on the north side is 3 feet wider than the sidewalk on the south side, which is where our attention's been directed, the traffic lanes on the south side, existing, are wider than the ones on the north lane. So there's room to do things like that.
Can we go ahead and take a vote on this, because we're running out of time?
Yeah.
And, from Dave, what I'm hearing you're saying is that you would be comfortable just saying improve pedestrian and bicycle connections, period. We don't even need to have to define where it is, no?
Well, there are two different issues here. One is, I was saying, you may need to talk about adding or improving. And the other is, it isn't just the railroad tracks to the east. We've talked repeatedly about how to establish more connection across Santa Fe Drive. Right now, all we have is Little's Creek. But then Tony's going to raise, if I'm anticipating Tony, is going to raise the question, who's going to do that? Are we talking about a raised pedestrian walk? And one of the things we had talked about was finding some way to encourage, promote whatever development goes on that existing parcel over there, to include that kind of a flyover or some kind of a, so that's what we have in mind. Anyway.
Craig?
I support it just the way it's written. I think improve is broad enough to imply that there could be other crossings at other locations as well as what's existing there now.
Okay, all those in favor of 4C? Kurt's against? So we only have about 5 minutes left, so what I propose is that we stop here and maybe consider having another meeting to continue this so that we can keep the momentum going. What do you guys think about that?
Could we get our congressman to put another Monday in April?
We could probably do that.
No.
Next Monday is Historic Preservation Board, so you'd either have to meet at the same time as Historic Preservation Board in another room, or you would have to find another date that might work.
So next Monday, I'm busy no matter what.
You're busy.
Yeah, Tony, you're stuck. Sorry. We didn't tell you that at the beginning of the meeting when we...
We also would need to check and just see if Doug is available to film us, and also if we do have a room available. So.
Because our next meeting is April 25th, and that's a long time in between. No, nobody wants to meet?
I think we can wait.
Just to
I
share the
thought
pain
I'm
with
busy
Tony.
that night.
So everybody agrees to keep the meeting on the 25th? And to progress as much as we can? That works. What about the format? Is the format still working for everybody as we're kind of going through it, or do we need to kind of adjust? And
I think we keep knocking it out. This way we'll get through it.
It looks like at the pace we did tonight, we should be able to finish next
Yeah,
time.
I would like to come up with the idea that we will finish, that next week we will finish the circulation, do the economic development, the parks and trails, and the sustainability, and we will keep working until we're done. If it means we get out of here at 8 o'clock, we get out at 8. If it means we get out of here at 10, it means we get out at 10. If we pull an all-nighter, we pull an all-nighter, but at least we're actually going to get something done.
Steve, I support that. Yeah. Except I'm not going to be here for the April 25th.
And for $20, Steve, I won't be either, and then they'll go faster.
well, and remember that once we make these changes, we're going to have to bring it back again to the commission to make sure we haven't missed anything. And then also we have to address the rest of the plan to see if the commissioners agree with other components.
Yeah, because right now all we've done is address the goals, policies, and implementation strategies.
Yeah, and then also plan for the public hearings.
But at least with my idea, we will know that we will be done with all the goals, policies.
So our goal for the next meeting is
Admirable commitment.
Well, I just think if our whole night is and our sleep is going to be compromised, we might actually be a little bit quicker with things.
So do you guys support that overall goal? Like everybody's supporting that overall goal to get as much done as we can, to finish it all at the next meeting. I think we can do it, I really do. Okay, and any other comments on the process? All right, seeing none, we are actually 30 seconds early. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And all those in favor?
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, guys.